Okay, so I agreed to talk about Roman coins in Britain, and this may seem a very much wider ranging start. It's really just to set the scene, and one can't really do Roman coinage in an hour. So what I've tried to do is just look at a couple of topics that I find interesting, and hopefully you will too. At the end of it, you're not going to see every Roman coin, you'll be glad to know, that was ever used in Roman Britain. But I want to start really with the origins of coinage. You know, if we're talking about coins, what are coins and what are they for? And the origins of coinage really are in the Eastern Mediterranean, modern day Turkey area, around 600 BC, and places like Ephesus, the very first coins were produced. Prior to that, there was a system of weighing metals, particularly in that area, electrum, but in other periods, copper and other rare metals. And so what is a coin? A coin is something that's officially produced. It is stamped, has a certain quality of material. Sadly, our coins today have no intrinsic value. In fact, they're just junk. But traditionally, they are of intrinsic material. Even copper and bronze coins were of some intrinsic value. So with that sort of in the background, some of the earliest coins then, or rather pre-coinage money, includes these items from the Eastern Mediterranean, copper ingots from Cyprus, and electrum pellets, but unstruck, from Turkey and surrounding areas. So what were they produced for? Trade, international payments, and one suspects in many cases, particularly in the first coins, for things like paying mercenaries and state employees. So this is one of the first coins from the Temple of Ephesus in Turkey, and interesting that the lettering apparently says, "I'm the badge of Phanes," whoever Phanes was, but you can see the stamp marks. It's made of electrum, which is a natural mixture of gold and silver. And in case you don't know where Ephesus is, but all of this area, Lydia, is the birthplace of really our coinage. And some of the early coins then having images of animals and sometimes abstract designs, and often punch marks on the back. Then the art of coinage spread to the Greeks, and the Greek city-states produced their own coins. So numerous city-states producing money. Two main weight standards in the Greek world, but individual places identifiable by the pictures on the coin. So if you couldn't read the lettering, and often the lettering is fairly minimal on Greek coins, the image, the owl of Athens, and the coins of Athens were actually known as owls, but Pegasus for Corinth and so on. Some areas, though, still continued to use a sort of pre-coinage system. And in the 6th century, Black Sea producing these non-functional arrowheads, large numbers of them found in big hoards, thought to be a primitive money type. And my favourite ones from the Black Sea, these beautiful little dolphins, but they are coins. They've got an inscription on them, and they were officially produced at Olbia for trade and other purposes. In terms of Britain, if you look in any of the coin catalogues of the coins of Britain, they will often start with ring money. Many people today, these are late Bronze Age, early Iron Age gold rings, sometimes solid, sometimes copper with a gold coating. Many people really today think these are more ornamental or personal adornment type items, but as with gold today, I'm sure in terms of barter and trade, these would have been acceptable. And interestingly, Julius Caesar, when in his sort of notes on Iron Age Britain, refers to the Britons using money of iron, and the currency swords from Dorset and this other dagger-like bar from Manchester are proof that he was right. You know, he was absolutely right that the Britons were in some places using money of iron. I'm not aware of any from Sussex. I'm aware of 2 fragments from Hayling Island in Hampshire. It'd be interesting to know if there are any currency bars from Surrey. Possibly the Womber Temple may have had one. I'm not aware of it. And then the main coinage affecting the Celts. This was a very important coin of Philip II of Macedonia, the father of Alexander the Great, copied in extremely large numbers by many of the Celtic tribes, with the head of Apollo on one side and a charioteer on the other. And the first coins that we really get in Britain are imported from modern-day Belgium and northern France, these Ambiani staters, based on those early coins of Philip II of Macedonia. And perhaps the first coins that we have in Britain that are locally produced are these Iron Age Potine coins from the Essex, Kent, Thames Estuary area, extending into both Surrey and Sussex, made of tin, high tin content. But the first really large-scale use of coinage is not Roman, but is a direct result of the Romans, and these Gallo-Belgic E staters from the continent are found all over southeast England in large quantities, dated to the period of the Gallic Wars. And are these the payment for mercenaries fighting on the continent and bringing the gold coming in the other direction? So after that, we then have a gradual development, fairly fast development, in fact, of Iron Age coinage, many different types. And finally, the addition of inscriptions. So on this one of Cunoblin, CAMV for Camalodunum on one side and CVN for Cunoblin on the other. So the use of Latin in the absence of a Celtic written language. And in the more southern areas, coin of Verica, COM.F, son of Commius, the great king who fled to Britain, the south coast, from Julius Caesar. And Verica there, VIR, Rex, the Roman for king. So an effect by the Romans on the early coinage here. People have used coinage in areas of usage of coinage to come up with some of these possible tribal areas. So on to Roman coinage. We won't worry about the 2 Caesar expeditions to Britain, as we've noted. Caesar actually refers to coins of gold and iron and I think silver as well. But by the time 100 years later that Claudius's invasion, we have a very developed Iron Age coinage in southeast England. So topics I briefly want to look at tonight: purposes of coinage we've partly already talked about, paying of state employees, paying of mercenaries, paying of taxes, paying of tribute. There are a number of reasons, not usually for the benefit of the public going shopping to Sainsbury's. Most of these coins are very high status money. They are possibly for gift exchange and for those type of purposes. But with Roman coinage, we also have the purposes of propaganda. In the absence of newspapers and televisions, coinage was a good way of getting messages around the empire. So we need to look at the supply of coinage and site losses. So the coins that we find on sites, what does this tell us? How significant are they? Irregular copies and forgeries, money hoards and votive deposits, the end of the monetary system, and finally the use of coins for archaeological dating purposes. And the date of a coin, we may be able to date when it was manufactured, but often the important date is when was that coin likely to have been lost by. So those are the topics I want to consider. So just to shock you, some of you may be surprised to discover that whilst the Greeks were making their beautiful coins in the Eastern Mediterranean, in early Rome, much of the monetary system, if you can call it that, are these crude pieces of chopped up bronze, which were weighed, and hoards of these have been found, not just in Rome, but in central Italy generally, quite rightly known as rude. They don't look anything special. So a very, very unsophisticated currency system, not currency, but barter system based on bronze. Slightly better versions. There are a number of central Italian areas which produced imitation shells, often probably using genuine shells as the mold for making these bronze currency pieces, or wealth pieces is perhaps a better description. And then luckily the Greeks come to southern Italy and Sicily and the southern areas of Italy, and they bring their coinage with them. And the earliest genuine Roman coins, one at the top left, is based on the Greek tetradrachm weight standard, and very, very fine example. Even says Roman on it. You know, how often do you get something in archaeology that tells you the period that we want to know? And you've got Romulus and Remus being suckled by the she-wolf. And on the right-hand side, you can see an example of another early Roman currency system, big ingots of bronze, really very large. You wouldn't be able to put this in your pocket. It's a very heavy item with, in this case, an elephant, sometimes cattle, sometimes a pig, sometimes other designs. But the really significant thing in terms of Roman coinage for us is the introduction of a new currency system in 211 BC, the silver denarius, and that's the bottom left. And so we've got a silver coin, and the X behind the head is telling us that it's worth 10 bronze asses. So a silver denarius worth 10 bronze asses. Later on, it becomes 16 asses. And the currency system becomes fairly developed, and this is the Roman Republican period, with some gold coins, the silver denarius and the fractions of those, and then a very extensive series of bronze coins, with the bronze as being the main one. Very few of these, other than the denarius, Republican denarii, have really been found in Britain. Most of those coins, some of the early Roman coins were cast, but most of them are struck using a hammer and two dies. So you can see putting a piece of metal in between two dies and hitting it. I assume with a club hammer rather than this rather large looking pickaxe that this chap on a Roman moneyer's tombstone is using. I think that would be rather hit and miss. But there we have a moneyer presumably standing on the right hand side, watching his slave or servant doing the hard work. So a struck coinage in most cases in the Roman period. And this is an example of a Roman die for making denarii. Mark Antony, one of the commonest Roman silver denarii that are still found, not so much in Britain, but generally in the empire, are these legionary denarii. He had to pay off his troops, and so he produced large quantities of these legionary denarii with the name of the individual legions on them. So at the end of the Republican period and coming up to the Imperial period, we have much more sophisticated coinage. Julius Caesar is the first to actually put his portrait on a coin. So top left, that is, thought to would be a fairly good likeness of Caesar. And I've put on here for fun, Mark Antony and Cleopatra underneath. Look how ugly Cleopatra is. She's slightly better in top right. But of course, she was also the lover of Julius Caesar as well. And then we've got one of these legionary denarii at the bottom right. So the coin of Julius Caesar would be almost 95% pure silver. The legionary denarii of Mark Antony were only 50% silver. And for that reason, they lasted very much longer than almost any other Roman coin. And I was involved with reporting on a coin that came from a Hadrianic hoard from Sussex, and there was a really worn example of one of these legionary denarii in there. So that had actually lasted something in the region of 150 years in circulation, and was absolutely knackered when it went into the ground. But it won't disappear until the current coins have less silver in them than it has. So bad money drives out good. Famous saying, and almost certainly true. So here's the head of Julius Caesar. And so coins give us a portrait gallery which can be compared with sculptures and marble busts and so on. So Augustus then, the first of the imperial emperors, and on his coin putting his claim to fame, Caesar, son of the divine Caesar. So he was the adopted son. So come AD 43, the currency system that would have been brought over with the Romans, and some of the Republican silver coins came during the Iron Age and have been found on Iron Age sites, but the bulk of the Republican coinage was still being used in AD 43 and would have come over with the armies. And what we have is a gold aureus, a silver denarius, and a bronze sestertius. And the sestertius is worth 4 asses, so 16 asses to silver denarius, 25 denarii to a gold coin. And that was the triple metal system. So it always fascinates me that many Roman writings don't refer to buying a villa for, say, 1 million denarii. They will actually say 4 million sesterci. And I'd be interested to hear anyone's comments on why things were valued in sesterci rather than denarii. It may well be that there were far more of them in circulation, but you would have needed large numbers, and they're big, fairly bulky coins. So Roman imperial coinage, the coinage that we have, there are various catalogues cataloguing these. The coins in the British Museum and Roman imperial coinage is another catalogue. Sorry about the colours on this. Is a horrible slide, but it shows the relative size of the Roman coins at the time of the conquest. So you can see that the sestertius, which is a brassy material, is the largest by a long way, and for that reason the designs on them are often fairly good ones. Compared with much smaller coins, you get some really quite interesting scenes on them. Silver denarius and the gold aureus are roughly the same size. Japondius is 2 asses, a single as, and then you've got the half as and quarter as, and the half and quarters are very rare. I don't think I've had one to identify in all the time I've been looking at coins in Sussex. So at the conquest, coin of Claudius at the top, an official one with a Minerva type reverse. The problem facing the Romans was a lack of local currency in Britain, and obviously minimal Roman coinage. There were lots and lots of different tribal coinages, and so soldiers would be paid. It's often said that a soldier at this period will get 200 denarii or 220 denarii a year, and what they obviously wanted to spend in the taverns and brothels were much smaller denomination coinage. So the bronze as was really the smallest value coin that we find in Britain at this period, and in the absence of large quantities of these, you get lots and lots of copies. So the one at the bottom is probably almost certainly a contemporary coin. Some people have even suggested that some of these really barbarous copies were produced by the army themselves in the absence of much larger quantities of official mint produced coins from Rome. And of course, a lot of older bronze coins would have come over at the time of the conquest. I can remember in pre-1971 getting Victorian bun pennies in my change, and so old currency is still circulating. Here we have example of very worn coins still in circulation, being counter-stamped to say that they are still officially usable. So the state is not really producing the coins for the benefit of the public as we do in Britain today. I read somewhere that the cost of producing every penny that we spend today is about 2.5p. So we do the exact opposite. Rather than making a small profit for the moneyer, we're actually losing money by producing coins for shoppers. We've already talked about Roman Republican denarii, so this coin of 109 to 108 BC wasn't necessarily found in Britain, this one, but it could have been. Probably be in a much more worn condition, but lots of these have turned up, certainly in Sussex and in the rest of southeast England. So later on, we get larger quantities of official coinage coming in. Vespasian here, a nice silver denarius, victory in Serbia. So we're getting the propaganda value of coinage being shown here. And in terms of coins, we can use the inscriptions to both identify who the issuer is, and also by looking at the titles of emperors, we can date Roman coinage in some cases fairly closely, within 1 or 2 calendar years. So the 5th consulship of Vespasian, we know when the dates are for that, and can therefore date the coinage accordingly. So there are, of course, no coins that conveniently say I am AD 60. We have to actually go from historical sources and the known records of individual emperors. And one needs to bear in mind that the coinage is partly to support the functions of the emperor. So perhaps a lesser known one, they're often talking about military functions, but here he's also the chief priest. He has a whole range of roles rolled into that of emperor, and here we can see that on the coinage. So over the next 300 years, there is a whole portrait gallery of emperors and rogue emperors and usurpers and all sorts of people, junior emperors, often the sons of emperors would have been a Caesar, or an adopted heir would be known as a Caesar and then become an emperor. So all these different portraits, and in terms of dating, the portraits change over time. This slide sadly isn't in good chronological order, but you can see the range of portraits. This is one of my favourite Roman coins. This is Constantine II, aged 1. And, you know, he's actually depicted as a very small head. Most of them would fill most of the field of that coin. And yet he's shown as a sort of mini adult. So rather than showing him as a baby, he appears as a small adult. So he was made a Caesar at birth or near birth. Women also appear on the coinage. So the wives of emperors, the mothers of emperors, sisters in some cases will appear on, daughters will appear on coinage. And this is an example. One of the things that I've always wondered whether someone would do as a research project one day is look at Roman hairstyles on the basis of Roman portraiture of ladies. There's incredible detail on many of these coins, and they change, and whether it had the sort of Diana effect, so that, you know, this is the latest hairstyle of the empress as seen on the coinage, and whether that had an effect amongst the elite, who knows. The sesterci that I mentioned, the large foras coins with the larger field to show scenes. Top left, we've got another very clear message, Judea Capta. After the Jewish rebellion, Vespasian and his son managed to crush the Jews. And there's a clear message to everyone in the empire, you know, you fall out of line and you will get crushed too. Below him, Trajan, The Dacian Wars, always good for publicity to promote your victories. Hadrian top right, very different. Traveling around the empire, the acclaim of the people. So note the size of the emperor there compared with the ordinary public. The emperor is always shown very much larger. And then below that, Faustina II, one of the imperial wives. And again, you can see the hairstyle, this time very, very different. Often women will be depicted with holding a child or having children near them. You know, clearly one of their functions is to maintain the dynasty or the line. And these large sesterci, this is again a very nice example which shows detail of architecture. There is in fact a book on Roman architecture from coins, and you can see here how the Temple of Jupiter, the absence of any other pictures, this is something that we can look to. Now, reality. Sadly, we don't find coins in that nice condition, and life would be so much easier to identify and report on things. They tend to come out the ground looking horribly like this, sometimes better, sometimes much worse. And coin cleaning is and storage is an important consideration. Gold luckily doesn't suffer too much, but how often do we find gold coins? You know, I've never seen one from an excavation that I've been on. Very rare, but if you are lucky enough to find one, usually in good condition and usually with very minimal wear. So this Septimius Severus, a really fine portrait there, and a very fine portrait also of Medusa, with the snakes coming out of the hair. Shapes of coins, early ones tend to be good round ones. As you go on into the third century, the sesterci tend to become more squarish. And I wonder whether that's more to do with the production of coin blanks than necessarily wanting round coins. Now, a significant new coin that comes into play under Caracalla, again for the wrong reasons. So on the left is a silver denarius. Gradually emperors have been debasing the silver, so this was getting more and more base metal. And one way of making even more money was to suddenly overnight double the value of the coin. And the radiate crown that you can see on the right hand side, there are radiate crowns on earlier coins, but in this case it is thought that radiate crown equals double. And the Antoninianus very soon replaces the denarius, and for the late 3rd century many of the coins are known as radiates, and it is that spiky crown that you can see there. So making money by manipulating the currency. I think we call it quantitative easing today, where the bank just go and print a load more notes, but this is another way of doing the same sort of thing. And the effect of doing that is, of course, it will drive out the better quality silver from the past. So if there's more silver in an old coin, you will melt it down as the state would have done to make more of the more base metal coins. So this is an example of a later Antoninianus with, again, a radiate crown, and they tend to be slightly wider in diameter than the denarius, but also slightly thinner in some cases. And 3rd century then dominated by these. Some of the early ones are reasonable silver, but over time they become more and more base, and in many cases have a silver wash over a base metal material. Finally, after the currency has hit almost rock bottom, and I will show you some of that later on, Diocletian does restore the currency, and along with his many other reforms, did a good job. So the currency is reformed with the introduction of a silvered follis, so a much larger coin. You can see traces of silver still on this one. It's actually shining in the picture. Silver tends to migrate to the surface on these, and is often lost over time and with wear. He also introduced a new gold coin called the solidus. So the old aureus was made from 60 of them were made from £1 of gold. The new Diocletian version, 72, could be made from £1 of gold. The Diocletian ones didn't really take off, but Constantine the Great latched onto this, and of course far more coins then could be produced from the same amount of gold. And this is fairly pure gold, we might add. You tinker with the gold standard at your peril, whereas the silver and bronze, well, some bronze doesn't count, the silver it can be diluted. Constantine the Great, there are significant coins in his period, and I want to show you just a couple that you may well find on excavations. This one is a common one, Urbs Roma. It's a commemorative of the founding of Rome by Romulus and Remus, which you can see again on the right-hand side. Many Roman coins have that theme of the she-wolf and Romulus and Remus. And so that is commemorating Rome. Note that it's made at Trier, and much of the coinage that we get in southeast England, or England generally, comes from Trier at that point. There were the 4 emperors under Diocletian, and Trier was really the base for us at that period. So a lot of the currency comes to us from Trier. And you've got that down here, the mint mark, Trier, the second mint of Trier, sometimes P for the primary mint of Trier. And another commemorative coin, this time of Constantinopolis, modern day Istanbul. So the Byzantium, the old Greek city of Byzantium, renamed by Constantine after himself, and becomes the new Rome. And so we've got these 2 commemoratives, and if you find those, you can date them with great precision to 330 to 335. So if you want to impress people, always remember those ones. Another one at the same sort of period are the coins Gloria Exercitus, which we've got here with 2 soldiers and 2 standards. You see the 2 standards. Where you get 2 standards, again 330 to 335, and then it drops down to only 1 standard between the 2 soldiers, and they date to 335 to about 341. So again, methods of dating in the 4th century, many of the coins, if you can't read the obverse, the head side, the reverse will often give you a dating clue. And so the types on 4th century bronze coins change quite rapidly in the 4th century. And so often you start by looking at that rather than necessarily the head side. Doesn't help that we have Constantine, we have Constantine II, we have Constans, we have Constantius, II, so that often on coins you can only see parts of the obverse inscription, but this is a useful guide as well. And then this, again, a favourite coin of mine, Magnentius, where we've got a large Cairo. So the Christian symbols now beginning to come onto the coinage. Strange thing is that, as far as I'm aware, Magnentius was actually meant to be a pagan, but I might be wrong on that. Another coin produced by Constantine the Great was a silver. There were a couple of silver denominations, of which this is a silver siliqua of one of his descendants, worth a 24th of a solidus, and the bronze coins are of very much smaller and much lower value than these. Gold coinage remaining throughout the 4th century, very much as Constantine had issued it, with very little debasement. And that brings us on to debasement. So in the 3rd century particularly, there is massive debasement. So the silver denarius of Julius Caesar at 95% silver now drops to 50–40% in around 200. Then you can see Gallienus, which is 253 to 260. It's looking silvery, but perhaps only 5 or 10% silver. Victorinus on the right-hand side, maybe only 1 or 2% silver, sometimes none. It really, you need wheelbarrow loads of these coins, which is why you have hoards of thousands of them, because it's debasement. Doesn't do anyone any good. It's like in Germany in the 1920s. By the time you've taken your wheelbarrow of paper inflationary money to the baker, unfortunately the loaf of bread has gone up in price during your journey. So, you know, it's bad money. And this shows you the drop in the silver standard over time, from a very high level right down to a very poor level, and Diocletian therefore really needed to sort this currency, and Aurelian before him had improved things a bit as well. So the Mark Antony legionary denarius that we've already talked about, only 50% silver at the time. I suspect no one was prepared to melt them down, because you would have lost money, because there's only 50% silver in it. That's why they remained in circulation for so long. Mints. So we have here under Diocletian the use of the London mint, LON, on this coin here. On the reverse at the bottom there is often the mint mark, so Londinium. Colchester may or may not be a mint. Sam Moorhead, when he was talking to us a few months ago, was saying the sea mint could be Clausentium, it could be a travelling military mint, or a mint associated with usurpers Electus and Carausius. But Trier, you can see, is a major supplier of currency to us, but over time these other mints are also producing coinage, and Rome is becoming a backwater from our point of view. So here again, looking for the mint mark, and it's interesting to see how coins travel across the empire. They would have been paid in taxes and then repaid out as paid to soldiers and so on. Contemporary forgeries and copies. Barbarous radiates. In this period, at the end of the radiates, around 270 to 275, when the official coins were only 1 or 2% silver, there are numerous barbarous copies, sometimes almost as many barbarous as real ones, who were producing these, whether they were officially allowed to circulate. Often in the hoards there is some element to try and ignore them. At Beachy Head, on, sorry to use Sussex examples, in Sussex, some big hoards there. It's clear that in the hoards they tried to weed out these barbarous ones and have mainly official coins, but they may well have been necessary as for local trade purposes. And some of these you can see, this is almost the right size for an official coin, and you can see some of these barbarous ones. At Lydney, it is said that the Lydney temple site, there were some barbarous coins almost the size of a pinhead. So they could get very small, and it's even a blind person would have no difficulty seeing that these weren't the real thing. So were they allowed? What were their functions? Are they in fact a votive coinage? May not actually have any monetary value at all. Coin forgers' equipment. This is a famous hoard where they were clearly getting official coins, melting them down, making them into smaller pellets, and then reissuing them as forged examples. Forging has always happened ever since 600 BC with the ones in Lydia, and until recently, the reason we changed our pound coins was that 3% of all the pound coins we were using in Britain were fakes, and most of us were totally unaware of them. And if you were aware of them, you just passed them on fast. If they didn't go in the meter at the car park, you try to get rid of them as soon as you could. So forging is always happened, but it's a question of whether it's official or unofficial copying of coins. This is another example. Many of the ones found on excavations are in fact copies rather than real ones. So at the time, plated denarii, a good plated coin would probably pass through people's hands, but over the time the corrosion products have happened, and in this case the silver is blistered off, and we can see the underlying copper alloy core of the coins. And forgers' molds. So I'm sure this still happens today, but very easy to take an official coin, stamp it into clay, and then actually get a fairly likable impression on a fake one. Site finds. Sorry to use the Sussex example, but Bridge Farm, one of the roadside settlements on the so-called London to now Barkham Mills Road. Here, currency going back to Republican times, so 88 BC, a lack of Iron Age pottery on the site. So are all of them, there's quite a number of these Republican coins, they may well have all come over in or around AD 43. There were a couple of Iron Age coins, and then the whole sequence goes through to the late 4th century. Now, how do you deal with site finds? And Sam Moorhead and I think David Callow have also talked about the need to quantify coins. Richard Rees, one of my old tutors at the Institute of Archaeology, really excellent teacher, he came up with this method of looking at coinage by having 21 periods of issuing of coins and then working out the percentages of each for each site. And in a later model, so this was a model of losses. So this is coin losses, not necessarily the coins that were in circulation, but the ones that we have found on excavations. And this one, Housteds of quite a famous site on Hadrian's Wall, one of the forts. He'd adapted this so that the losses per 1,000, it's quite likely actually that Clive Orton in the audience may well have been in discussions with Richard Rees over the quantification of coins. But here you can see peaks. These are the horrible coins of the late 3rd century and then the 4th century peaks. So he did over time modify it to 21. There were 21 main peaks of coinage. Foreign coins. The coins used in Britain are largely those produced in the western part of the empire. Coins such as this from the eastern part, a hoard found in London in 1908, would have had no currency value in Britain, and maybe that's why they were found as a hoard, maybe a trader's loss, or even kept as curios, but would have had no use within our system. So British related coins, coming to the end. Coins relating to Britain. Claudius issues this gold coin commemorating his triumphs in Britain, and you can see De Britain on the triumphal arch. Hadrian, slightly different story. So he comes here and sorting out the people in the north and building Hadrian's Wall. And this is the first time that we see Britannia, who reappeared in the 17th century on some of our coinages, and lasting for several centuries. And Antoninus Pius, the next emperor, here you've got a very sad looking Britannia, often said to be a weeping Britannia, sitting on a pile of rocks. This again implies, like the Judean coins, that the Romans had to sort out problems and punish people. Septimius Severus, with his sons, came to Britain in the late 3rd century, and we've got Brit as part of his titles on the obverse, and both of his sons, Caracalla and Gaeta, also have the same title, Victoria Britain, so telling everyone what he's done. This one's out of sequence, but Commodus, there were also troubles in Britain in the late 2nd century, and here we've got Vict Brit, so major victories being celebrated. Whether these coins, they're mainly found in Britain, so whether the message was really to tell other Britons rather than people abroad what the Roman Empire could do. And then the breakaway emperors, Carausius and Electus, which Sam Moorhead gave a whole lecture on, and they produced Roman-style coins. So with nice message, Pax, peace on the reverse, but a very common one for him. And as Sam described, Carausius comparing himself with, on a par with the two main emperors on the continent, Carausius and his brothers, a rather cheeky reference to the people on the continent. Killed on the orders of Electus, as far as we know, his finance minister, who then became the next Romano-British emperor, and showing the galley, which protected him from re-invasion for a while from the continent. And then this isn't a coin at all. It's actually a medallion, of which there's only one example, and that's in Paris. And this shows Constantius I coming to Britain to recapture Britain for the empire. And here we have the first scene of London, and presumably this is the Thames with a war galley coming up the Thames, and it was made at the first mint of Trier. So a medallion, which would be a high status gift or present. Hoards, until relatively recently, people assumed that the finding of large numbers of coins, usually in pots, sometimes in other containers or no container at all, was in the absence of banks, that people buried their money for security reasons. More recently, people have queried this, and many of the hoards are now thought to be votive hoards with no intention of recovery. So we have various hoards. There are various periods. 180, if you remember, was a time of troubles in the north. There are various periods where people seem to have been more likely to bury money in the ground than others. Maybe they couldn't remember where they'd buried it, or so they came to an untimely end, and the coins have remained in the ground. This was a hoard, the so-called high-wheeled hoard, which I've always found rather amusing, because although it was found by a metal detectorist, I actually claim that I found it. There was the finder actually used to take coins into Lewis Museum to get them identified, and the portable antiquities person at the time couldn't be bothered and said, "Oh, try that Rudling character. I can't be bothered with all this Georgian halfpennies." And I discovered that 2 Roman coins were stuck together, and I said, "You've got a hoard somewhere." And the bloke spent 3 months going back to every site that he'd been on until he found the hoard. And this is, we told him not to dig it up if he did find it. So what was the first thing he did? Dig it up. And there were some 2,500 Roman silver coins came out of the ground. And one of them, this is only the second example known from Britain of one of the emperor's wives. So quite rare discoveries in hoards. Hoards are very important for looking for those rarities. Distribution of hoards of slightly later period, but we need to be aware that it's not just in Britain, but also on the continent, all of this area subject to being overrun by barbarians. Hoards sometimes found not just in pots, but in cloth bags within pots. Very rare to actually get the fabric still surviving. And the famous Frome hoard with some 52,000 coins in there that Sam talked about before. Other votive places, Bath, these are sadly all modern coins that have been thrown in there. And many of us today still like throwing coins into watery places, but they had some 2,000 coins that came out of here when it was excavated, so offerings to the gods. Then the final days of coinage, Constantine III, one of these usurpers who left Britain and took with him various troops from Britain, undermining our defences. So some gold coins is still being made at Trier, affecting Britain. But the most significant ones are probably these clipped siliqua. Britain seems to be almost unique in having clipped siliqua. These they've been so badly clipped that the emperor's name has come off it, and also the title is on the reverse. And it is thought that they've been taking off bits of the silver, partly to melt them down and make the scrapings into new coins or into bars of silver, but these are circulating into the early 5th century. And the last hoard from Britain happens to be in Sussex, is the Patching hoard from near Worthing. I'm afraid it's a horrible slide, it's out of focus, but coins with gold rings and ingots silver coins and silver ingots. We're beginning to get into bullion hoards now rather than coin hoards. So around 460, and this is one of the last Roman coins to be found in Britain, minted at Constantinople. Has ended up near Worthing, and this is the last one that I'm aware of, 461 to 465, and silica, strangely unclipped. These are actually all unclipped, so someone had been keeping those in good condition for a long time. And then after that, you tend to get the hack silver and bullion hoards. This isn't from Britain. And we do occasionally find coins of the Eastern Empire, the Byzantine Empire in Britain. I'm unaware of any from a sealed context, but metal detectorists have found these. So I think that is all. I just wanted to end with a plug. If any of you are interested in the archaeology of Sussex, we have a symposium which you can visit online. It's going to be online and in a hall on the 25th of March. And our own group, please don't forget to book a place for the conference in May.